NFL.com analyst Nick Shook in today's National Perspective presented by Global Transport.
Now, Nick, last year at this time, the hype train was out of control for the Cleveland Browns. This year, it is much more subdued, but that's probably a good thing for what is a very talented roster with a first-year head coach in Kevin Stefanski.
Yeah, no doubt. I think the less attention the Browns can garner, the better, because it'll lower the pressure on them. And we all think of pressure as this, metaphorical force that, athletes are going to say, well, there's no pressure. We come in here, this is our job. But let's face it, last year there was a lot of pressure on this team. And we could all feel it in week one, and especially when things didn't go their way against the Titans. And we all know how the rest of the season went. So for them to not have those expectations, to not appear on the cover of Sports Illustrated, to not be in all the magazines and at the top of every sports talk show for the last 3 months and for the next month is a very good thing, because with this new staff, as you mentioned, they got to get their feet wet a little bit and kind of get going and get their scheme and their system in place. And I'm sure they've done a lot of work toward that, but it's all been remotely because of the pandemic and everything else. And they're just now getting on the field and starting to really work at it. So the less expectation, the better for them, because it might be a little bit difficult the first 2 weeks, especially considering they're facing a team that went 14-2 last week right out of the gate. But they have the roster that they need to be very successful. It's just a matter of kind of putting it together, and the less attention, I think, the better for them right now.
Today, pads come on, finally. I know that's always your favorite day at training camp. What do you expect to see from this team once the pads come on and we start to see the physicality? We see the Andy Janoviches, who was brought in to bring that thumping mentality as a fullback. We start to see this kind of take shape.
I think the number one thing I want to see early on is how Jedrick Wills can adjust to the NFL level, because he's going to be expected to be a starter from day one, and he's going to have quite a test on a daily basis from Myles Garrett. I mean, we saw it last year when Myles was going against Greg Robinson and all the trouble that he would give him, and how it really is a test on a play-by-play basis. So I think that'll be a big thing for him, and also how Jack Conklin kind of fits into that group, since he is a new arrival as well. But I have confidence that he'll be an instant upgrade and somebody who fits in pretty seamlessly. But overall, I'm really excited to see how these guys run the football, because as you mentioned, with an Andy Janovich type guy who drives a beat up truck, he's there to block guys in open holes. I mean, you got to love a hard-nosed traditional guy like him, and how he fits into an offense that, of course, has Nick Chubb in the backfield as well as Kareem Hunt. And we've seen what fullbacks can do in the past. I mean, look at CJ Ham in Minnesota. That guy basically earned himself a multi-year career in the NFL based on being in the Gary Kubiak style offense in Minnesota, which was coordinated by Kevin Stefanski last season. So I expect big things out of Janovich, who I think was a really good fullback in Denver, who just didn't fit anymore schematically because of Pat Shurmur's arrival. And I was very excited for the Browns when they got him in that acquisition. So, I mean, it should be a really talented offense. We obviously know what's going on at receiver and tight end, but running game wise, I mean, it starts with the run, right? And it starts up front. And me being a traditionalist, if they can establish that, man, the sky is the limit.
Obviously, yes, it is easy to be excited. A lot of the focus, rightfully so, on this offense. But this team, you got to play, look, 3 phases. Special teams, Mike Priefer's here. They're in good hands. Defensively, Joe Woods comes in. They are in good hands as well. He's been successful everywhere he's been. But more questions on the defense than certainly on the offense. What do you expect to see from this Browns defense, and what do you want to see here in camp?
Well, I think the biggest question mark is the linebacker position. How does Sione Takitaki step up into his role in year 2? We should expect some big things from Mack Wilson because of what we saw from him last year, and especially in the preseason. Now that he's in his second year, he's got a year under his belt. He's a very athletic and very talented player. How do the acquisitions that they made there factor in? BJ Goodson, that type of guy, and as well as your draft picks. But really, my biggest question, it's not the linebacking core, because I think you can kind of navigate that because of the defensive front they have. I need to know how these safeties are going to play, because you replaced your 2 starting safeties last year with 2 new guys this year. One of them coming right out of the draft in Grant Delpit, who I think has a very high ceiling if he can be healthy. I think he got held back by that ankle injury last year and definitely would have been a first-round pick. You don't get nicknamed Baby Maul for no reason, right?
Right.
Jamal Adams, who just fetched 2 first-round picks in a trade to Seattle, by the way. If you can get somebody like him and you got him in the second round and he can play like that out of the gate as a rookie, that's a massive pickup and a huge addition to your defensive secondary. And then the other guy, Carl Joseph, who is a bit of a thumper and was really starting to finally come into his own at the end of his run in Oakland. At that point, unfortunately for him, and fortunately for the Browns perhaps, that regime had kind of moved on from him already. The Browns might have landed themselves a steal if he can continue on that path that he was headed on before the regular season closed last year. So if those 2 guys can both play well, then I think this defense is a lot stronger because you're already confident what you have at corner and you're already very confident what you have up front. So I think it really starts with the safeties, and you can kind of figure out the linebacker situation as it goes on. I think there's enough talent there. But definitely those two new guys and Andrew Sendejo, see what he can do in kind of a depth role. And you can't forget about Sheldrick Redwine too. You know, he had a few nice plays there at the end of the season last year. So definitely comes down to what those guys are doing on the back end.
Absolutely. It's a back end look that's got, at least from a draft